All right, I got all 10 hoses off. Yeah, baby, leverage. The main gland seal disintegrates. Piston rebuilt. It's like delayed going into second. There we go. Oh, these are supposed to be dry clutch setups. All that is water. The clutch is not disengaging. We're gonna dump it in here. It's moving. Let's see if we can tension this thing up. And that is significantly tighter than it was. All right, so I've been diving in trying to figure out why I kept having issues with the engine sputtering. There was a big old leak right underneath. Oh, it just slips off, look at that. All the bolts for the valve cover out, but this one here broke. Got on 12 volts directly to the starter. Let's see if it starts on 12. That terminal is completely corroded and missing, but there's nothing that actually grounds the starter motor itself to the engine. Usually it gets its ground through the case. Ready? There we go. Yeah! Now make sure you keep yourself quite lubed during certain activities. One of them is when you put your hose on. But they are all pretty heavily gunked up. There we go. Nice! So I literally drove it to right there and it died again. We definitely have a fuel issue. I think it's the tank is clogged. Brand new jump pack. So when I mess with the fuel shutoff on the tank, it starts to get a little bit better, but it's not perfect. So I definitely think it's starving for fuel. If I prime up fuel system with this primer pump, I can usually get it to start for a minute. I wonder if the seals in this primer pump could be bad. Still could have a line issue, a fuel line issue. And then fuel shut off at the tank could have issues. And then we have problems with the tank itself. I think it's just supply to the pump, to the injection pump or to the injection pump housing. that's causing us to die. Because every time we start moving is when it does. Like, it dies on me. Because it basically, I think stuff's sloshing around the tank. It's clogging something up. And then it can't get fuel past maybe the tank. I'm just going to let it sit for a minute. I love working on heavy equipment that sat for 25 years. Actually, I really do. I enjoy it a lot. But it comes with its ups and downs. And as with anything in life, you have the moments that you absolutely love it, and you have the moments that are frustrating. And you got to be able to handle both. Otherwise, you'll never finish anything, and you'll never really get anywhere. So, you know, as not fun as it is to have issues even after you've done a bunch of stuff to something, what can you do? We'll get it whipped. I guarantee it. All right, there's our fuel shut off from the tank right here. So I've got it shut. Let's take this line off real quick. Can't quite tell, but I don't think it's blocked. There's our problem right there. I'm opening this up, and I'm not getting any flow. We're stopped up in the fuel shutoff here. Guess I should have expected this, but the fuel should be coming out right here, like a lot. We're getting nothing. All right, I'm gonna go get a wire. Try and jam it up there. Yeah, that thing is totally stopped up. Still not a lot. At least that fuel shutoff works. Let's see if it comes on. Yeah, it does. I think it had more fuel than that coming out of it. So I've got a couple of plugs here. If this starts gushing, I'm going to plug it, and we're going to look at this shutoff. Really not coming out very fast. This thing actually looks pretty clear. Yeah, that's not plugged at all. Got a bunch of pig mats and wipers here to collect everything. Alright, I just want enough to start this thing and move it, because I want to drain all the fuel out of the tank and probably pressure wash the inside of the tank. The danger here when you're threading these on and you don't quite know is that you don't want to cross thread them and ruin the threads, especially with something brass. But it's feeling pretty good. But you also want this stuff to be tight, because you don't want any leaks where fuel is going to be leaking out and air is going to get into the system, especially with the diesel. All right, good enough. Open this up all the way. And let's try and give it a start. my swivel has a leak and it's burning me. Gotta get some wrenches. We got it a heck of a lot more clean, and man, that hot water pressure washer, it cuts through that grease like a hot knife through butter. So, if you haven't checked out that video, there's 2 videos on getting that thing up and running. Absolutely awesome machine. Glad to have it in the arsenal. The little baby dozer needs some more work. If you haven't seen the previous videos on this, this is my 1978, I think, D3 dozer. It's a D3 LGP. LGP stands for low ground pressure. Essentially, it's wide tracks. It's got a Caterpillar 3204 diesel engine in it, and I've been working on getting it going and getting it ready to go. Well, it keeps plugging up. Every time I pull it out and I run it, the engine bogs down, dies, and won't start. So I've narrowed it down to basically the tank is completely full of junk, and it's clogging up the fuel line. So I think I'm going to do is we're going to start with that. That's an important thing to fix. We need it to run and be able to run well. So I'm going to get this thing started. We're going to tilt the blade down, kind of get the whole thing angled like this so we can get the fuel tank drained. We'll go from there. Alright, so here's inside the tank. And as you can see, it's rusty around. There's some surface rust on the walls there. I mean, it really needs a good scrubbing. Right there is the drain valve, and then I put this tube on here, clear tube, down into this bucket. I've got 3 more buckets that are all clean. I may run this diesel in something else, filter it, but I also want to see what's at that bottom of that tank. So this will drain out as much as it can to that valve, and then the rest of it we're going to have to pump out or just wipe up with rags and stuff. It looks like it's definitely been opened up at some point. See that patch there? Somebody cut that tank open. Let's get to draining it. See what we get out of it. All right, see if this thing works. Not working at the moment. Man, that thing is plugged. Even on this end. There, that's empty now. Alright, I'm gonna stab up into the tank, and I might make a mess. Alright, mess made, but I think it's open and should drain now. that's why we have pig wipes. There is a lot of just like surface rust that's broken off the walls of the tank and kind of just gummed it up. I can grab a handful of it. See all this? This is just rust that was sitting at the bottom of that tank. Some of these are pieces from that screen that fell in. Some of this is just off the walls of the tank. Some of it's just from junk and dirt falling in there, who knows. But that's what we're going to try and get out. This is the reason it keeps plugging, is this crap will just kind of fill up the fuel line and then it plugs it off and then we have issues. So I just got done looking in here with the inspection camera and I looked past the baffle, which is like right about there. And there is a good ½ inch at least of stuff built up on the ground there. And the problem is that the pickup, so essentially this is the shutoff valve that allows the fuel to leave the tank and go out to the line to the actual engine. Well, sometimes what I've done is I've taken a piece of tubing, and you wouldn't want this at this high. You shove it in there and you solder it in there, and then basically it creates a pickup that's higher than all of the junk in the tank. And so then it's picking up from clean fluid, and then all the other stuff can settle down below. Well, in the tank, there's a tube that is, it's got to be like barely off the tank, maybe 1/4 inch, ½ inch up off the bottom of the tank. But immediately after this, it comes in and goes at a 90 degree. So it basically comes in and bends, and that's part of the actual tank. And one option would be to take a punch and just bash it straight up in there, reach in with a magnet, grab that whole tube out of there, and then install this with a pickup high enough. Well, that's a fix. It is something we could do. I just think it would be better to go the same route as Mr. Farmcraft did and cut a hole in the tank. Really, you can see, like we've shown before, somebody cut a hole in the tank there before. If you cut a hole here, you've got an access panel to the tank for the next time that it does get all junk filled and needs to be cleaned out. Make a good gasket, and it's way easier to deal with. The tank is very flat. There is no dents in it. The other advantage, so I've got it marked out here. I'm going to do a big one. Essentially, this inner square is what I'm going to cut out. This outer square is where the actual plate, the cover plate that I'm going to make is going to go. And essentially, all of this rust from the armrest is going to be eliminated on this tank. There's a little bit on the hydraulic tank. We'll clean that up with some wire wheels and put some paint on it at some point. But if I cut it right here, all that rust goes away. Put a good plate on it. We'll go ahead and use this bolt and this bolt as two of the bolts that are going to hold the cover on. I want to make sure that no water gets in this, because for sure this thing's going to sit outside, and I do not want water getting into the fuel, sitting down all the way at the bottom, and then getting sent all the way into the engine and causing major issues. That is really the biggest reason that I'm kind of warring with myself as to whether or not I want to do this or not. I just think this is going to happen again. I think I'm going to end up with more rust in the tank in the future and have to clean it out, and I'm going to be in the same boat where you can't quite reach that side. This side's good enough, but that side is so full of junk that it's going to plug right up. It is better. We'll just cry once and cut a hole in it and go from there. It's a great idea, great plan. In my personal opinion, I think it's going to solve the issue for the rest of this machine's life. But that ain't happening tonight. I gotta get going. So I'll be back tomorrow and we'll get that hole cut in the tank. Alright, so we're going to check for some steel here for that fuel tank. See what I've got. Well, that would work, but it's got holes in it, so it won't. That piece, I think that's 1/4-inch plate. That's like 1/16. So that big sheet would work. Do I have anything smaller? I don't know if that's big enough or not. It's definitely not square, but it's 1/4-inch plate. Found this piece of diamond plate. I think that's either 1/16 or 1/8 inch. Found this chunk of steel. Might work. Not sure if I want to go that thin. That piece of 1/4-inch would work. It's just, I have another piece down at the cave that would work. That's about the same. Yeah, I'm not finding much more. Plate steel is something I use. I'll grab it wherever I find it. So a lot of my steel, I got a lot of round stock in here, pipe, you know, miscellaneous pieces of whatever. You know, a bunch of teeth for machines that I've just kind of collected here and there. There's some more plate. Those are some big pieces. I mean, piece of 1/2-inch plate. That's a chunk of steel right there. Now we're getting into hydraulic hoses and electric motors. So yeah, they're not gonna have any steel down there. Let's take that guy with us. That might be an option. I think I'm gonna leave. I don't know, maybe I'll take it. This was from an old Raymond forklift, an electric forklift. It was like a cover for some part of it. And I thought, well, that'd be some nice 1/4-inch plate for something. I guess that is a straight line. And I think I need 7 inches by 18 inches is about what it was. Or 8 inches by 18 inches. That could work. I don't have a tape measure on me. Should have brought one. Alright, we'll go with that. If not, I have that other big chunk of plate down there at the cave that we can use and cut. Yeah, none of these fit, so I need 17.5 inches, technically 18-ish, but 17.5, so that I can use those 2 bolts, the bolt holes that are already there. I'm kind of debating on just doing away with the need to use those. I just wanted to see if I had something already similar cut, similar size, decent thickness. All right, so I'm looking at this plate here, this Raymond cover, and I'm basically finding that I have 7 inches there to that point by 18 inches. So that gives me 1 inch less width of plate that I wanted. I wanted 8 inches by 18 inches. If I go 7 inches by 18 inches, it still puts me in this pretty much same place. I was going to come way out to here, but I'm just bringing it in a bit. And so I think that would be fine. I could even shift the whole thing that way a little bit too, if I wanted to center it, and I might do that. But the opening is still going to be, what is that going to be? Let me grab the tape. The opening will still be something like 4.5 inches wide, which is plenty enough to get a hand in there, a vacuum or whatever. So I think that's the route I'm going to go. I want to keep it square, the big plate, for as long as I can, because you never know what you need a big chunk of steel for. And this is a good 1/4 inch thick chunk of steel. I'm going to grind this off. We'll cut that line, we'll cut this line, and then we'll put a square to square up the 7 inches from this cut line. Because of this rounded shape, it's difficult to do anything. Luckily, there was this straight edge, so we can, I basically can use this square to get my line straight there and straight there, and then I know that those two are parallel to one another. There we go. So we'll do another bolt hole here, 3 along here, 3 along here, another bolt hole there. And then I think that's about a 4-inch wide opening, 1.5 inch overlap on each side, and 2 inches on the ends. Whoa! Snap that bit right off. This little drill's getting overheated. All right, we're in. Holy mother, my goodness. This had to happen. Wow. Let me get you in here. All right, check that out. So that's the baffle. That's the side that we could see, and it's fairly clean. Here's one of the plugs. Here's another one. But that side, man. There is 2 or 3 inches of stuff in there. So let me just grab a handful for you. Look at that. That is just one handful off the bottom there. That is crazy. I need like a 55-gallon barrel of Evaporust, and that would be an awesome way to clean this. But I don't have that, so we're going to vacuum it out and scrape the walls down, get them as clean as we can. And then honestly, we'll just rely on the filter. As much as I'd like to do more, can't really do much more. But now we have a way to clean it out. So we'll get all this deburred, and then we'll finish making the lid. Must be a pretty common D3 thing for these tanks to rust. Who knows what kind of steel they use there in Japan. We've got machines much older than this thing that don't have this problem and have lived similar lives. What's that? Some sort of bolt. It's like aluminum. Feels really light. It's either aluminum or plastic. This thing is super, super dirty. It's not even dirt, it's rust. So what happened is, essentially, this thing was not left with a full tank of fuel. And because it wasn't left with a full tank of fuel, the water will condensate on the outer wall above the fuel, causing surface rust. And that surface rust then creates bubbles in the steel, and then little pieces flake off, and it falls down into the tank. And over time, it can rot the tank out. But this tank is so thick, I'm not worried about that at all. But what it does do is it absolutely clogs up the fuel system, because the fuel pickup can't pull through all that junk. It can't pull out huge chunks of rust through the fuel line. And that's our big problem. That's why it keeps stalling and dying on me. Look at that. That's all out of it so far. We're not even done. So I'm going to keep at this, and I'll bring you back when I'm a bit further along. I got most of the muck out of there. And this drill is really starting to frustrate me. I think I still got a warranty on it though. I drilled holes here and here for the 2 existing bolts. We're going to bolt this on, and then we're going to drill the other ones all the way through. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. I might tap the plate on the fuel tank and then just thread it right into that, but it's not real thick. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is drill the holes for the bolts, put a bolt in, put a nut on the bottom side, a couple tacks, and then it'll have a nut in the tank that this threads into. That's kind of how they did it with all the others. I don't have any basically sealed nuts, so that basically the whole bottom is encapsulated so that nothing can leak out. I don't think it's going to matter because around the bolts, there's going to be a gasket all the way around it. So the bolt holes essentially are going to be encased in that gasket. So perfect. So then I've got one more hole on each end and then 3 on each side. I drilled all these holes to 5/16, and that's going to give me a 3/8/16 hole that I can tap into the tank. And then I do think I'm going to put a nut on the bottom and weld it there, so there will be threads in the tank, but also on the nut. I want it to really squeeze together. I want the tank and the plate to really squeeze that gasket as best we can, so that we don't have any issues with leaking in the future, both leaking fuel out, but what I worry more about is leaking water in. Doing both, I think, is going to give me the best shot of that, and I'll show you what we're going to make a gasket out of later, but we're going to do that. I think I'll probably do RTV on both sides of the gasket. I mean, I don't intend on taking this off anytime soon. Maybe initially I'll do no RTV just so we can mess with it if I had to, if we get any problems. But we do have another issue. So down in the fuel tank, the pickup tube has a hole in it. And I'll show you that at some point. But let's keep going with this. Alright, that is all in preparation to weld nuts on the inside. So, trying to get all the rust scale, get down to some clean metal so that when I go and put some tack welds in there on some nuts, we are not welding through a bunch of rust. So, really that nut is just mainly there to give me a little bit more meat than this like 16th inch steel. So let's go find some nuts. Mine are too big. So initially I was just going to use these normal hex nuts and weld these in there. The downside to a hex nut is how thin the wall is. And so when you're welding to them, you can weld them. It just doesn't take much to blow through them. So instead, we're going to use some old school square nuts. Dig through here, see if we can't find any that, like, does that look right? That one's too big. Like that. So this is a square nut. Essentially, it's a square. Pretty simple. But you find these on a lot of old tractors, old machines. I know they still make them and use them in some situations today. So the advantage of a square nut when you're welding, even if you weld on the flat, you have a wider area to weld to. But if you were to weld to these corners, you have all that extra meat between the threads and the actual weld to avoid getting too far in and distorting the nut when you're welding it. So that's essentially how much more space it's going to give me to be able to weld I'm already going to be welding in an uncomfortable, odd place, kind of down in the tank, coming up at an angle. But yeah, I think these will do great. I'll dig through here. I need 8 of them. There's 10 total bolts, but we're using the 2 armrest bolts, so we need 8 more. So I'll find 8 of these. All right, so I've got the holes all tapped. So we're going to run that down there just as a holder. And then we'll take this. I cleaned up all the edges and I flattened the top. So we don't want it tight because we want it to not bind, but we want it just tight enough that the bolt will go in and out of it, kind of like that. So, because we don't want it to act as a lock nut. So now I'm going to do 2 more because I've got 3 bolts here. We'll do 3 at a time. And that'll give me a lot more threads because basically there's pretty much like 1 thread going through this, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch plate. All right, that should do it. I got them way over welded. So one thing we should talk about is welding safety when it comes to welding on tanks, specifically fuel tanks. And if this was a gasoline tank, I wouldn't be doing this. Gasoline tanks are way more volatile and the fumes are way more explosive and they can catch fire a lot easier. But because this is a diesel tank, it takes a lot of heat to ignite diesel, even in a liquid form. And so vapor, almost no chance this is going to explode or cause any kind of backfire at me, especially because I've cleaned the tank out. And even when I was cutting the hole in it, I really debated on filling it with water or not. And honestly, I had it so well emptied that I decided I'm not going to put water in it. And it was totally fine. The little bit of residue that was in there didn't catch fire. But you really do have to kind of weigh it. I'm not telling you should do it this way. Plus, I have welded on diesel tanks before and haven't had any issues. I'm doing it safely. I'm wearing safety gear. You know, when I was cutting into it, I was wearing a full face mask and a welding jacket, you know, in case something did kind of explode. I'm kind of like at least covered. But you don't have to be worried as much about a diesel tank as you do a gasoline tank. So just be safe. If you're going to weld on a tank and you don't know what you're doing, probably shouldn't do it. Getting in here and welding like this, you know, I'm welding at the top. I'm not down in where the residue is. And even if I was, I'm not too worried about it. I don't know. There's pros and cons to everything in life. And you got to be able to weigh them for yourself. And for me, in this situation, I felt that it was safe for me to weld these nuts on. I felt it was safe to cut the hole in the tank. You know, I've done stuff like this before, and I have never had an issue. Now, just because you've never had an issue doesn't mean you won't have an issue. And so you have to prepare yourself. You have to wear safety gear. You have to be on guard and be as careful as you can. But you also have to get stuff done. And so, you know, you got to really balance out the safety with, you know, getting things done. And a lot of things in our society have gone over safety. And I understand that accidents have happened and people have died in certain situations, but people have been welding on fuel tanks for generations. I know people that'll weld on a full diesel tank, you know, maybe not a big weld, but you know, if there's a small crack in it, they might weld on it so long as it's below the fuel line. Me personally, I'm not doing that. That's not something I'm going to touch, but I'm not an expert. I don't do it all the time. Somebody that's got the experience, has had the know-how, is practiced, feels safe, knows what they're doing, you know, that's their decision if they want to make that. For me, I wouldn't, but in this case, what we're doing here, adding some nuts on the bottom of that to get some more threads, cutting the hole, making some sparks in the tank, I'm not too worried about it. We're still going to clean the whole tank out more than I already have. You know, I wanted to get all the welding done, the grinding, all the scraping. We're going to take some paint off. You know, I want to get all that done, and then we'll do a final cleaning of the tank. I think I'm going to pull it out, and we'll hot water pressure wash the entire inside of the tank as best we can, and then, you know, kind of get it as clean as we can. We are not going to line this with any kind of fuel tank coating. I don't want to do that. I worry more about the fuel tank coating failing at some point and then clogging the fuel system, sending it all the way back, potentially damaging the injection pump and causing issues with the engine, more than I worry about a little bit of rust being in the fuel. A little bit of rust will be caught in the fuel filter, and that's his job. So we'll get quite literally as much as we can, and we'll go from there. Machines have been running like that for literally generations. We're talking 50, 60, 70 years. I mean, people have had issues with fuel tanks having junk in them. And this thing runs great, and it's been packed full of stuff in the tank, so I'm not worried about a little bit in there. But like always, we do the best we can, get it as clean as we can, and really without this hole, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I couldn't get in there. But for now, I'm going to kind of get the tank cleaned up, get as much of the junk out of it that we just dumped in there as I can, and we'll go from there. There's all our holes. There we go. There's our gasket. All right, there it is. That's our cover. So I sanded all the red off, got all that red paint off. I'm going to paint it. I'm going to prime it, then paint it yellow. We may not paint this tractor yellow again, but for now, we're going to paint it yellow just so it doesn't flash rust. We're not going to paint the underside of it. I do not want to have it fail and have that go down into the fuel in the long run, but man, that looks so good. Gasket all the way around. Sealed up really nice. The tank was nice and flat, so there was not really any worry that it wasn't going to seal. I wasn't too worried about that. But what I think we're going to do is we're not going to RTV this now. I want to run it a little bit. I want to see if the paper gasket will do enough all by itself. And if it will, great. If not, I want to have the ability to open it back up just in case we have other issues. But it's not hard to do that later. All I got to do is pull the bolts out and RTV it. Downside to that situation is by that point, I'd probably have to make another gasket for it. But, you know, whatever. It didn't take very long. Probably took 20 minutes to make the gasket. We got a beautiful looking little cover. And now we have an accessible fuel tank to be able to be cleaned in the future when it gets full of junk from sitting for however many years it's going to sit. So, but not today. Today, we're working on getting it back in order, back in shape. Now it's time to really clean that fuel tank. So we'll hit it with some primer. and then we'll paint it. It's sprinkling out here. Bring that in real quick. Alright, so now I want to pull it out, but we don't have the tank all put back together. It's not cleaned out, but we're going to pressure wash this with the hot water pressure washer. So I've got this fuel tank from, I think it's from like a generator or something, like a small one. Right there is where the hard line stops and the rubber line meets. So that rubber line goes over to the primer pump. I think I can get that disconnected right there. We'll hook it to this tank. And I'll bet this is like a gallon, maybe a gallon and a half. Should be enough to run it. All we need to do is pull it out, pressure wash the inside, steam clean the inside of that tank, and then pull it back in. I think it should ride right there. Push the pedal, doesn't hit it. Perfect. These jumper packs are so useful for so many different things when working on stuff like I do. Faster than hooking up a battery, that's for dang sure. Glow plug. Hopefully it just pops right off, but we will find out. Let's give it some fuel. Cranky, cranky. Well, that was a bit interesting. So, what happened was, I had it on jack stands to keep the blade from coming down because I wanted it up. I wanted the whole machine tilted so that all the fuel ran to the bottom of the tank. Well, I'd been messing with the forward neutral reverse, and the linkage had so much slop in it that I thought it was in neutral, but it was in forward. So that little bit of RPM, it drove over the jack stands, broke both of them, and I was able to get it back into neutral. That has got to be something I fix soon. Like, I have got to figure out how to get that slop out of there. And it's a bunch of bushings in the actual mechanism itself. That also might correct our problem where we're not getting anything but first gear. And so there's 3 forward gears, and I only get forward. And so I'm hoping it's just linkage, slop, and linkage, you know, out of alignment, out of adjustment. I don't know. For now, let's get that tank clean. We'll go from there. help if I connect the wand just a little bit. You used to stick your hand in here, you'd wipe it on the walls, and it would be covered in rust, residue from the fuel, and we got it so much better. I think I might take a wire wheel to the bottom of the tank, and you can see where the line was for a long time. The fuel line was right there. So it left all this additional space up above it to rust and fall into the tank, and that's really what caused this issue. We're looking a mountain better. Awesome. And that steam cleaner, man, it just rips stuff off so fast too. So impressed. So see this patch here? So somebody else, like I said before, cut into it. The way they patched it was they reached in with these little pieces of flat bar and probably tacked them from the outside. Once those were tacked to the outside, they probably put a piece of plate, and then that gave them something to weld against, so they weren't just seam welding it, the two pieces together. It's actually a really, really smart idea, and it's never leaked there. I've never seen any drips at all. It doesn't have any residue from fuel, so whoever cut that open and repaired it like that did a great job. Is that I don't know, pinhole maybe? Factory pinhole? I don't know. I don't think it likes that big wire brush on this die grinder. I certainly don't want to breathe it in. All right. I cleaned the bottom one more time, went on the walls, the wire wheel, and man, looks so much better. I am going to hit this. I'm going to hit this one more time with the hot water pressure washer, get the last remaining stuff out. I even went kind of in the filler neck, got all the big chunks out. Kind of hard to show you, but it is 1,000 times better. So one more quick steam clean, then I'll dry it out, and we're gonna close this baby up. All right, here's our next issue. See that? That is the pickup tube. It comes up out of this block where it's like welded or soldered in. It does like a little loop. It's got this little strap right there. And then it comes up about an inch to right next to this bulkhead. The reason for that is if you're on a dozer and you're basically flat, it's fine. It doesn't matter where the pickup is. But if you're down in a ditch coming up and you have, say, a quarter tank of fuel and the pickup is up here, it's going to be running out of fuel. But if it was in the middle of the tank where this pickup basically goes to, right by the baffle, then the chances of running out of fuel or starving the engine for fuel is a lot lower, because essentially it's trying to keep fuel at its highest point in the tank will always be right in the middle of the tank. Let me show you what happens when I spray some brake cleaner through this tube. Actually, I'm going to go from the bottom. I spray that. See where it came out? Some came out of the end, but some came out right here. So one option is to cut that right there and just bend this up. I really struggle half-assing stuff. So yeah, what I'm thinking we're gonna do, we're basically just gonna lop it off, pull that tube out, and then make a new one. I've got some of this 1/4-inch brake line, hard, or is it fuel line? It's just steel line, and it's the green coated stuff. This one's already got a flared end on each side, got a couple fittings on it. I don't really care about that. I care that I have this and it's not going to cost me any money. I'm pretty sure I could bend this up to fit what we need, but let's start by zipping that thing out. So there's our tube. And there is the hole right there. Slice it off right there. We're gonna have to drill it back out. We have what we need to match, and that'll help us. So I cut a small piece of it, as you can see here. Actually, that fits. That's gonna fit really nice. That's gonna solder up really well. And to think that this part is not serviceable. Yeah, not for me. I actually found that I had a roll of that same size tubing. That's what I cut this little piece from. So rather than destroy that one, let's try and use this. Here's what we're trying to match. Let's go with about that much. Alright, now to make the bends. Really ought to go to the other shop and get I've got a little cheap bender. But I've got this. This is meant to help you make bends. So now we have this sharp bend. That's going to be the hardest one. Yeah, that was definitely soldered in there. I can see the solder on the end. I knew it. Getting close. I got it. It's got to almost turn to a 90 right here. Come straight down so it can go into that hole. But beyond that, straighten that tip up, make this flat, make it straight. I think we're going to get there. I forgot I had this here, so we're going to try it. I probably needed to do this before I cut it. That would have been probably the way to do it. Maybe not. Maybe I can get it. I think I got it. Kind of pinched it there, but let's see if that works. So I love learning new things, and you know, I've bent tubing and stuff before, not a lot though, and I've never really used one of these, but this was the first attempt. It'll probably pass, and it will probably work fine. Just a little worried that bend is just a little too tight, and it's going to constrict fuel too much. So I went ahead and did another one, and I used the bender while it was still on this. And I was able to get a much tighter bend and a more consistent bend without distorting that tube. Same on the end here. And now we pretty much have an identical match to what was in there. The only thing I need to do is when I get it in there, I need to adjust. I might need to take some of this off. So I'm gonna go try it, find whatever depth I need, and then we'll trim it down and then solder it in. I wish it was better designed so you didn't have to actually fabricate it all, because it's a lot more work to make one than if they had some fitting that could be taken off, or I don't know. I guess nobody else is cutting into their tanks other than, you know, Farmcraft. You know, he and I are working on the same machine, so we've got a lot of the same problems. But I'm gonna try this one out. We'll see what it looks like. I don't have an exact like strap. I thought about putting a a nut, one of these like line nuts on it, and welding right to that. That would have been fine, actually worked really well, I think, but I'd have to unbend all this. I have this, it's like the top side of a clamp. The only problem is it doesn't go all the way to the ground. So I've got this, another half of a clamp. I think if I cut off part of that, make it a little lower, I can get it to the point where it's tight. All it has to do is keep this tube from moving and eventually breaking off here, because it's going to be soldered in there, so that shouldn't move, shouldn't pop out, it shouldn't do anything. Weld here, weld there, and then I have the tube exactly where it was, just like the old one. And they had just like a metal strap of some kind. The other advantage of my tube is that this whole tube sat on the ground, basically the bottom of the tank, and that's what caused this hole. This tube only touches way down here, only at that elbow. That's the only place that it touches. And so that's the only place that it can rot out, unless so much junk gets packed around it that it piles up over the tube. Then I guess it can rot out anywhere. But I kind of debated on cutting this down because I could make it identical to this, but I decided I'll leave it long, which brings it up off the ground a little bit, and then the strap will go maybe right in that area, something like that. And we got a new pickup tube, brand new. All right, here's our tube. Fits right in there, like that. And then the strap will get welded there. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put some soldering paste, basically flux, right around here. And then we're going to melt some solder right onto it. This is old school soldering paste. It's the same stuff I used when I fixed old Red's radiator in the barn a handful of years back. Not even sure if they're in business anymore, but this stuff's good stuff. Not getting it hot enough. I think this whole plug might be soldered in there. They looked like they was getting wet around the edge. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and grab the vacuum and stick it in here to suck the fumes out, because I think it's using up all the oxygen for the torch. There we go. Let's see, rock solid. Perfect to weld this tab here. But I'm gonna make sure, I'm gonna check from the bottom and make sure I didn't melt all the solder out of this plug. If it's soldered, it might be welded. I haven't totally figured that out yet. There you have it. Non-serviceable part, properly serviced. Nope, that plug is welded. There's definitely a weld all the way around there. So that first time around I was using a different solder. I switched over to this Keister acid core, and this is way better for what we just did. Even in old barns, when I go and I rescue old machines, or I'm finding stuff that I'm buying from, you know, people that are wanting to get rid of junk, I'll grab stuff like soldering paste. This old stuff, as long as it's in good condition, as you can see this is, it's so much better than some of the junk you can buy today. Not to mention, I save money and I get this awesome can. Look at this. I mean, it's amazing. I bet you there's not even a date on this thing. I don't know. It's got a 1903 date, but that's just a patent date. That one says November of 1926. I don't know, did I just use 99-year-old soldering paste to fix my 1970s Dozer? Maybe. If you know how old that can is, that'd be awesome to know. I'm curious. And then this thing says established in 1899, but does not say any other dates. I'm sure it's equally as old. Good enough for me. It's not flopping around. Good to go. Well, I just figured I'd install the fuel drain that was in really good shape. It worked great, but I broke it. Snapped off in the tank. I think I can get it out with an easy out. It's a bit frustrating because it's a nice valve. Alright, here's where it broke. It's got to come back towards me. There we go. Got it. You know, the frustrating part isn't that I had to get it out, it's... That was a nice valve. So for now, we're just gonna put a plug in it, because I don't need this valve. It literally is just to drain the tank. And I'll order one later. There it is. Well, there's our plug. It'll do for now. So this is the fuel screen that basically goes right inside the top of the tank. And ever since I've had it, they didn't have one, or so I thought. But this was all sitting on the bottom of the tank. This basically goes something like this. In there. And then this thing is the dipstick holder. So you'd have the dipstick that basically drops down through. And as you can see on this one, same deal. This one had an inner mesh and an outer mesh. This one's just got mesh. But I think what I'm going to do in order to hopefully keep this dipstick tube from falling out is I'm going to weld. It's only got one tack weld there. It's not welded up here at all. I'm going to weld it here for a second one, and I'm going to weld it once there and once there. Just enough to keep that thing from falling in or rattling apart. It's better than nothing, but this isn't the greatest. This is aftermarket quality, but whatever. We'll make it a little better. Alright, good enough. Don't even think that screen is welded. I think it's glued. Huh. They just wiped RTV around here to seal it to this top and bottom cap. Wow. It'll last until it doesn't. Got some rain on me. I don't want this getting wet. got too many things torn apart for me to be able to deal with everything getting wet right now. All right, there's our fuel screen. Here's the dipstick. This dipstick was also down in the tank and completely rusty. I can kind of read the numbers on it. Not in the greatest shape, but we're gonna run it. And then the fuel cap. So when I was cleaning out the fuel tank, we basically found this little aluminum plug, and I was like, I don't know what the heck that is. It is aluminum, it's an aluminum bolt, but it has a hole all the way through it. And that hole essentially is a vent. So when I had this cap first, there was no bolt there. So I found one that worked, but it's not right because it should be vented. And I thought, oh, maybe it vents through underneath the rubber, but it can't. So the way it vents is right there and right here. So we definitely need that. So I'm going to clean this up, and we're going to put this thing in there with Loctite because I really don't want it coming out. And we should be good to go. It really isn't something you go taking apart very often, so. Perfect. I'll get that tightened up. One more thing put back together. I painted all the hardware. It's probably going to get scratched up installing it, but you can always hit it again with some paint. Plus, some of this paint here chipped off just using the hot water pressure washer. I just discovered something. You see that little pinhole right there? That's an actual hole. At one point, they welded on the outside of the tank right there. There's a whole bunch of weld that I never noticed before. And so it must have rotted through, would be my guess. And maybe that's why they cut this open. But I've got the welder out. It'd probably be smart just to throw a bead of weld right there on this side, even if it's sealed on the other side. And then, I mean, I'm in here. I literally was doing my last check, just looking around the tank, making sure I didn't leave anything in it, like a flashlight or something. And I saw it, and I thought, yeah, let's look at it a little bit more. And you can actually see where the weld is on the outside, because it kind of left a mark. I'm going to grab the welder. I'm going to throw a spot of weld on. That'll do good enough. Works for me. Make sure I don't have anything else left in there. Alright, I'll get the rest of these thrown in there. And then we can fill it with fuel. Alright, let's see how easy this thing's going to start. We've got the fuel tank all put back together. I put about 10 gallons in it. Should be enough. So I primed it a bit. We'll give it some glow plugs. See what happens. everything's working. Fuel system's great. Forward in first gear is great. Reverse is great. But I don't have second and third. Either that's the linkages are out of adjustment or the actual clutch packs in the transmission are bad. Let's hope it's not that. Seal, it's been leaking. Neutral, first, third, and reverse all have 330 PSI. Second has about 50 PSI. What does that mean? Does that mean something's stuck in there and isn't quite moving? Are there some piston seals that could be bad? I don't know. Let's see if I can pull it out by hand.